watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub. And if you're a caring Jewish parent, Jewish grandparent, or any caring Jew for that matter, then it's likely that one of your primary concerns is the extent to which your children or grandchildren, and the next generation of Jews in general, will in fact grow up to adulthood with a strong sense of Jewish identity and Jewish commitment. This is a perennial, enduring concern of the Jewish community. What can we do to pass a love of Jewishness, of the Jewish tradition, Jewish identity, on to our children and grandchildren? And in the open world in which we live today, as free Jews, what are the best ways we can counter the pulls to assimilation, and in many ways a rather thoughtless, simplistic form of universalism, which seems to minimize the importance of a particular Jewish integrity, Jewish life? Well, I'm extremely pleased now to be able to sit with two individuals who are doing worlds to excite young Jews with Jewishness and to help instill in them a wonderful embrace of Jewish life and Jewish identity and Jewish commitment through their extraordinary work with the Jewish Camp movement, which a recent study done by Dr. Stephen Cohen documents how Jewish camp experiences are among the most effective ways to produce young people who, as adults, are emotionally attached to Israel, are involved with a synagogue, bring Shabbat into their homes, and financially support Jewish institutions and Jewish life. It's a joy to introduce you to Jeremy Fingerman, CEO of the New York-based Foundation for Jewish Camp, a foundation dedicated to Jewish overnight camps throughout North America. Jeremy has an MBA from Harvard. He's past president of Campbell Foods, where he introduced kashrut to some Campbell soups. He also served as president of the RAB Food Group, parent company of Manischewitz, Season, Rokeach, and other kosher brands. And I've had the pleasure of meeting with Jeremy at Kosher Fest exhibitions, and then I spent a wonderful few days with Jeremy at Gary Rosenblatt's Conversation Retreat. Jeremy, it's a pleasure to be sitting with you once again.
Great
Thank
to be
you.
with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
And joining Jeremy is a woman who may well be the heart and soul of the Jewish camp movement, as well as a number of other major efforts which she's involved with that are at the center of Jewish life today. Elisa Spungen Bildner, who together with her husband Rob established the Foundation for Jewish Camp in 1998. Elisa is a graduate of Yale, has a law degree from Columbia University. She's a journalist. She worked as a reporter and editor on New Jersey's The Star Ledger, and she taught journalism at New York University and then at Rutgers, where the Hillel is named for her husband's parents. And she serves on a number of boards and has helped develop the JTA and has given of her time and resources in outstanding efforts to improve the character and quality of Jewish life today. And Elisa, what a privilege it is for me to meet you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you both. Come to talk to us about Jewish camp. I want to begin with this, which is Stephen Cohen's Camp Works, the long-term impact of Jewish overnight camp. And this report created an enormous stir in the Jewish community. Elisa, to some extent, I was surprised that people were surprised. because if anyone has had any camp experience, and you were a camper for a long time,
I was.
I think that it is sort of self-evident to people who go to camps that if there is a positive Jewish camp experience, it instills in young people an extraordinary love of Jewishness. And I wanted to know whether you were surprised by anything in this study, and were you surprised by the reaction to the study?
Actually, I'm not surprised. It's very obvious if you've gone to Jewish camp, and I went to Jewish camp for many, many years in my life. It's
Where?
Very JCC camp in Wisconsin and a Camp Ramah in Wisconsin as well. And all my kids have gone to Jewish camp. But that said, it's very obvious to us, my husband and me, because both as parents and as campers ourselves, we get it. And people who go to camp get it. I cannot tell you the number of times, for example, that I have walked into a room, Jewish crowd, bar mitzvah, whatever it is, and you mention Foundation for Jewish Camp, that you support camps across North America, and it's like, everybody's raising their hand. I went to this camp, I went to that. The enthusiasm is unbelievable. Overwhelming. But, and this is the but, while it's obvious to us, it's not obvious to people who didn't go to camp, even though intellectually or logically you can make a very, very good argument for Jewish camp. And particularly for funders, it is an issue. Many of them perhaps have not gone to Jewish camp, and you can talk about it to whatever, but unless you're sitting on a Friday night doing Shabbat at Jewish camp, you don't get it.
You don't get
totally.
it. Right.
So initially when the foundation started, there was a real question about whether to invest money in a lot of research and put it on the table, Camp Works, or move on and just start funding and working with Jewish camps. And we made the decision not to. And so this is in a way overdue because, again, funders would come back and say, so, Jewish camp works? What? Tell me what.
Jeremy, you succeed Jerry Silverman, who is now with what people think is the Federations, Council of Jewish Federations.
JFN.
Yeah. First of all, you had a long and successful career in secular business life. So what brings you to Camp Foundation?
Well, what brings me here is really what happened 37 years ago when I first went to Jewish camp. And my experiences really put me on my Jewish journey, on my path.
Uh-huh.
And
where did you go?
I happen to have gone also to Camp Ramah, Wisconsin, and I think that's coincidental.
Oh,
but,
really?
This
Did
is
you
not a
know this?
cabal. No, he's so much younger. Please don't insult him. I'm thrilled that you think that.
You didn't date together at that camp.
No, it would have been like sort of, what are those movies where people are in different time periods,
Right.
Okay.
But okay, so
So it was always in my DNA.
Yes.
The camp experience, it stayed with me. The friendships formed stayed with me. It was really a part of me, even though it wasn't my professional career. It was certainly happening in my personal life, and so important in that. After we successfully sold Manischewitz, RIB, we sold
to a French company?
to Harbinger Capital, a
yeah.
hedge fund. A successful sale that then gave me time to figure out what I wanted to do next. And in the course of that, a call came from a recruiter about a job foundation for Jewish camp, and just hearing probably that name and Jewish camp came back with a flood of positive emotions and memories. And I remember sort of saying to my wife, I get this call from this Foundation for Jewish Camp, and she says, she then had a flood of memories of her own experience.
She also went to camp?
Interlochen in Eagle River, Wisconsin. We were probably separated by about 10 miles in the same years, same summers, didn't meet each other. Only if we had met at camp, it would have saved us 10 or 12 years of dating. We could have gotten on with things a lot sooner.
In my introduction, I tried to quote some of the things, the conceptual things that come out of Camp Works. And it indicates in this study, by percentages, how people who have spent time in overnight Jewish camps are more involved in Jewish life, Shabbat, synagogue, and in Israel, also in financial giving, in philanthropic Jewish causes. And we are unfortunately living in a time when even Jews who have money, very often do not give to Jewish causes. There's an extraordinary percentage of wealthy Jews who don't give any money to Jewish causes. And what this study shows is the extent to which camp experience seems to correlate with people who then go on to seriously greater involvement in Jewish life?
It starts really with what the Bildners created. They created a foundation that was based on a notion that the camp experience is really the basic building block of community foundation, community building. The tagline we have is the foundation, community by the cabinful. Bunk by bunk, communities are created in the friendships and the experiences that you have. That's a brilliant insight.
It's a brilliant insight.
That really Rob and Elisa, I think, knew and gave birth to this notion that getting people together, getting them to have fun with one another, getting them to feel the joy of Judaism would have all kinds of byproducts in terms of connection. As we say, you're 55% more likely to feel emotionally attached to Israel. Well, that happens because you're experiencing Israel with your friends in a fun environment and positive. And yes, there's real dialogue about Israel and contemporary issues are dealt with. But it's done in an environment that's of love and support and of friendship that I think makes it stick. And you can go down the list, whether it's that love of a Shabbat experience of praying with one another. Whether, many people say, that camp Shabbat experience is unlike any other. Well, if synagogues would replicate what's going on at camp, we'd probably have more people attending synagogues. So maybe we need to learn from this study. If camp works, how do we replicate the camp experience so it's not 4 weeks and 8 weeks, but it's 52 weeks, and it's happening in congregations and in community schools and synagogue schools, etc.
Elisa, you and your husband created the foundation.
Correct.
Your husband also is a camper.
He's a camper. He's a camper from a camp that is a secular camp that has a lot of Jews in it. And what he learned from his camp experience was that camp is a fun, powerful place. He can remember every kid in his bunk, some of whom he may be in contact with and some of whom he may not, but he certainly remembers those days. I remember camp as not only that, but also as a great Jewish experience. I had fun doing Jewish. So when we started talking about camp, we both were coming from an understanding of the power of camp, but it was very, very obvious that power superimposed or working with Jewish material was extraordinary. So it was not just friendship, but living Jewishly 24/7 in a really fun way.
Should I gather from what you've just said that in some way the impetus for the two of you to help create this foundation comes from you?
No, I want to be very, pretend Rob is sitting here.
I hear he's a very nice man, by
He's
the
a
way.
very nice man. He's a
Wonderful
very
guy.
nice man. He's a very nice man. But we'll just pretend. Anyway, so the impetus really came out of just a brief story.
Please.
We were both Wexner Fellows and spent a lot of time at conferences and other places talking about what the Jewish community needs. And one of our heroes in the Jewish community was Rabbi Herb Friedman, who had run Wexner, at the Wexner Foundation at one point, and he basically put out to all the Wexner Fellows assembled, at least during one period of time, there's no reason that Jews cannot build the perfect, it was Jewish day school or Jewish boarding school or whatever, and we walked out of that meeting and in subsequent meetings and said, there's no reason we can't have perfect camps. Our kids had gone to Jewish camp. We were absolutely sold on Jewish camp, but we knew that there was a stretch to go. Perfect is a funny word, and I'm not going to even suggest that camps are perfect, but we've certainly moved a long way from 13 years ago to now in terms of where Jewish camping is. Anyway, we walked out of the particular conference, turned to each other, both of us, and said, time to do something for Jewish camp, because surprisingly, and in fact, talk about surprises when you talk about CampWorks, et cetera. What was shocking is that nothing in the Jewish community was really focusing on Jewish camp.
That's right.
People were doing their own thing all over rural America and rural Canada, but very few people really knew about it unless those people had gone to Jewish camp. And this sort of circles back a little bit to your first question, which is, one of the reasons people don't understand the power of Jewish camp is because camps are not sitting on Park Avenue and they're not sitting on, the same kind of places in LA, Chicago,
They have
et
a
cetera.
different visibility.
You don't see what happens there. And so maybe for that reason, they were really ignored. So we started the foundation because we were adamant that the Jewish community, Jewish resources, and understanding of what works in terms of Jewish continuity be centered more on Jewish camp, and started thinking about the foundation at that point.
There's another aspect of this, that the camps themselves were running completely independently. There was no sharing before the foundation, very little sharing from camp to camp, no best practices, no communities of practice or cohorts to learn from each other, and no then aggregating as a field. And I think that's really another powerful outcome of the establishment of the foundation.
I had a feeling that one of the things that the Foundation for Jewish Camp has done is resurrect the whole notion of the importance of Jewish camping. Prior to the foundation, where did things stand for Jewish camps as opposed to where things stand now?
Where they were, look, Jeremy just started speaking about that in one sense, which is that it was, there were silos all over of Jewish camps, Jewish camp directors not really communicating, and best practices not being communicated, people working really hard in their own particular Jewish camp to make things work. And Jewish camp did work. There was also a sense that Jewish camp many years ago was something that was only for poor children, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It was a wonderful way to get kids out of cities that were not pleasant to be in during the summer. But Jewish camp really can respond to the needs of every single Jewish child from every socioeconomic point of view. And so there wasn't a sense that that was even possible. There was also a sense that in terms of, while there was great Jewish programming and great programming, more could be done. Again, we wanted to bring Jewish camp within the sort of the whole rubric of camp generally. There are many, many things that are going on in camp that Jewish camp could copy. And then just also in terms of the physical appearance of Jewish camps. One of the things that really set us off, Robin, speaking about my husband and myself, on Jewish camp was really this. We'd go into a Jewish camp and we'd see a tennis court that was a wreck, or we'd see a dining hall, that had water dripping down. This was not, a part of this was that there wasn't enough money. There just wasn't money in the field, and so people made do with what they had. It's not a way to entice Jewish kids to go to Jewish camp. And one of our goals, actually, is very honestly, is to get more kids who might be thinking of secular camp to think about Jewish camp, because in fact the tennis is fantastic, and because in fact the dining hall doesn't have water dripping on their paper plates or whatever, not styrofoam, paper plates. That they can be as good, if not better, than what the secular world offers kids during a summer.
What's the obstacle that you have to overcome in the family that is reluctant, or the child who is reluctant, to either send or go to a Jewish camp?
Right. I think it's, we'll do it in two ways. The first is program excellence. We have to make the case, the camps have to make the case, that the program itself is equal to other choices that are out there. So whether it's, if you're interested in specialty sports, we've got specialty sports camps that are Jewish camps. If you're interested in art and film and theater, and we have camps that offer those at high-level specialty programming. So I think it's that the program and the quality of the experience, you shouldn't have to give up anything.
I understand.
So that's number one. Then there's there is a financial obstacle, let's say, to overcome. And
are Jewish camps more expensive than non-Jewish camps?
Well, maybe in some cases, not more expensive, but it may be if we can add an incentive to get somebody to make a choice and to get them hooked. I think that's been a magical experience in the last 5-6 years. We have a program called One Happy Camper. It's an incentive program to give first-time kids and families an incentive to go to camp and to experience the joy of Jewish camp for the first time. Once they experience it, they're hooked, and they're hooked for 3, 4, 5 years, so a $1,000 investment pays off in a big way over the history of that kid. And a happy camper probably has a sibling underneath, or a cousin, for sure friends.
Yes.
So one happy camper promotes many more.
Oh, a happy camper becomes very loyal.
Yes.
Very well. Do you want to add anything, any obstacles?
Sure. I'll tell you two quick stories, and they're about my family, so I hope they won't kill me, but one of them is about my niece, who is right now, for the first time, at a Jewish camp in Manhattan. And I know that sounds like somewhat of an oxymoron, but in fact, you can have a Jewish camp in Manhattan, because the key is she's having a Jewish experience collectively with the community. Anyway, my niece, who is wonderful, went to secular camps with lots of Jews for many, many years, mostly because her friends went, which is one of the obstacles. Friends choose secular camp. It's very hard to say, I'm not going to go with my best friend. Anyway, she decided, because of the wow of this particular Jewish camp, I'm going to try this out. She's there now, having a great time. Second story, I have a niece and nephew who are very into sports, and they decided, they can't go to a Jewish camp because they're too sports-oriented. P.S., we found found both of them, I should say, a Jewish camp that's very sports-oriented, and they're happy. But the problem is that we have to do more marketing, and we are really going gangbusters in terms of marketing to tell the world that you can do in a Jewish context what you would also want to do in a secular context. You do not have to miss one for the other.
For some people, the notion of going to a Jewish camp, the bad way to say it is, it's too Jewish. In other words, there has to be, for some in this Jewish community, the word Jewish is an absolute positive word that draws you in. But for many of those who are not already in, the word Jewish has a different meaning. And that what you'll often hear people say is, well, I don't want my kid to be Orthodox. How Jewish are you going to make my kid? So that there is another obstacle, which I thought you were going to mention, and that is an emotional one that you have to get past. It's easy to deal with a family that's very committed to Jewishness, and then you have to simply make sure the camp you give them is qualitatively as good as a non-Jewish camp. But what about the fact that you're trying, I assume you're trying, to also reach families where the Jewish connection, you hope to build the Jewish connection through the camping experience, at least for the young person, if not in some way that it redounds to the entire family's experience. And I'm wondering, again, how do you deal with that? First, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And how do you deal with that?
Look, I think the first thing is this foundation is the biggest tent of Judaism that I think exists.
Yeah,
everybody fits under it. Orthodox, conservative, Reconstruction, Reform, Zionist, pluralistic.
Boy, speak to that for a minute. Organizationally, have all of these movements, and when I grew up, camps were all movement driven.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether it was from the far right to the far left, and whether it was Ramah or Sedgwin or a Nifty camp, they were all movement driven. Whether they were, Hashomer Hatzair, whatever it was.
Sure.
They were ideological and they were movement driven. And one of the things I did want to ask you is, and again, you come out of Ramah, but I wondered how you and your husband, JCC also,
Heavily.
and the JCC, by the way, was a movement of its own at one time.
Yeah.
Sure.
So how did you and your husband sort of see the umbrella, and have you been effectively able to in some way unite or bring under the tent camps with very philosophical and ideological differences?
I mean, well, I think that's the magic and the brilliance of this, that there's so much more that this group of educators and backers can agree on, the power of camp, than what they disagree on. And that what unites everyone, whether it's Orthodox or Labor Zionist or a community camp with very little Jewish content. But they agree first and foremost the Jewish camp, a Jewish mission, recognition of Jewish identity brings us together.
But practically speaking, what do you do for them? Why, if I am a Nifty camp, if I'm within the Reform movement, or I'm within the conservative, if I'm a Ramah camp, what do you do for me?
So take Israel education, Israel program content. We can help expose the wide range of camps, and we do this in an annual program training third-year counselors sponsored by the Avichai Foundation called Cornerstone. It is our cornerstone program. It's been around for 9 years. We're training now 45 different camps from every movement or every experience in how to bring Jewish experience moments, Jewish moments, to the everyday moments of camp.
Are you telling me that the Reform movement, that the nifty camp movement, let alone the Ramah movement, looks to you and Avichai to teach Israel and Judaism?
To give sparks of how to teach and communicate that in their everyday moments in the bunk and everyday programs in the camp. And the beautiful aspect of it is you can have experienced in that, whether it's Israel or nature or song leading, etc. Orthodox Mosheva camps, Ramah camps, URJ Reform camps, Zionist camps, community camps, the whole gamut. And they're singing and these counselors singing and celebrating together and learning from each other, and they are the power behind.
What do you mean they're singing together and learning together?
So
what do you really mean?
We have a conference.
No, I want to know if I send my child to a Jewish camp, whether it's, again, on the Reform movement, the conservative movement, whether it's an Orthodox camp, are you telling me that my Orthodox child is now singing songs with a Reformed child?
No, not at the camp. I'm saying that the training that's going on, the intentionality that the foundation is bringing.
That Reform song leaders are learning with Orthodox song leaders?
They're learning, that's what I'm telling you.
Where does this happen?
It's in May of each year, 45 camps, 260 fellows with about 100 faculty members are doing intensive training of the third-year bunk counselors, the most respected level of bunk counselors at these camps. They become every camp has to send at least four or five counselors to be in this experience.
Every camp?
Of the 45 that attend, the 45 that participate. When you come as a cohort, not as one counselor, you come as four.
And of the 45, do they represent every movement of Judaism?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've
it's
seen
staggering.
this?
I absolutely have seen this. I will go back to a question that you asked before, which I know is unfair to do, but the answer is absolutely yes, and I think that's one of the accomplishments of the foundation, that you can get every sector of Jewish life saying, sign me up, let me send a kid, or can you help me, or whatever.
We have to turn away camps.
Do you understand how extraordinary this is? By the way, not only is it extraordinary for Jewish camps, I want our audience to understand, this isn't being done anywhere else in the Jewish world.
I want to just.
And I just want to make sure I'm not that there isn't a romanticization here beyond reality. That's all. It is so atypical to Jewish life.
It's the it's the training that is the atypical, right? Then they go back and execute in their camps. But we're training in a Big Ten environment, and it is incredibly powerful.
Where does this happen?
It's at the Capitol. We run it at a retreat center. The Capitol
Can
camps.
Shalom TV come and see this?
We'd love to have you.
Can you wait till next May, though? Because we don't do it till next May.
We'll
call you up. Don't worry.
I want an invitation.
Okay, no, you should
because
go.
Because this would be spectacular to show.
So I would just mention another example of sort of the big tent that Jeremy's talking about. And then I do want to go back to your question about why Jewish kids might think, Jewish camp, I don't want to go. Okay, but let's finish this one.
Okay.
So this past week, our board met in Toronto. We move our board meetings around all over North America, and part of our board meeting is a board meeting, and the other part of the board meeting is we go and check out all the Jewish camps in the area, and all as many as we can get to. So this past week, we were in Toronto, and we went to 3 different Jewish camps, all of which are under the tent of the Foundation for Jewish Camp. The first was an Ultra-Orthodox camp, and we were there during the girls' session. And it was an extraordinary camp, and we all sat there, the board, camp director, everybody, and we had a...
And Elisa, what do you do for that Orthodox camp?
Specifically, I might have to turn to Jeremy on this, but certainly they are able to partake of any of the programs that we offer. I can't answer this camp specifically because I really don't know, but they would partake of any of the programs we offer, whether it's Cornerstone or any of the others that help to train camp directors.
And do you fund them?
You mean fund directly in terms of programming?
Yes. No.
In terms of
the tennis court that we want to worry about and the ceiling in
They're
the
doing that
they're doing that
locally.
They're doing that locally.
So that's not what you do.
That's not, from a strategic point of view,
Yes.
that's not the first thing that we do.
Okay.
but I do want to mention, so we were at that camp, which was ultra-Orthodox. Then we went to Camp Ramah, the Camp Ramah of Canada. And the third camp that we met with was a Zionist camp. All three of them.
Camp Shalom.
Camp Shalom, yeah. All three of them are under the tent, so to speak. And that tent really goes from end to end. And we have funded and we have offered programs to and had people respond to these programs from every aspect of that tent. And sometimes that tent means that all the people, and we went to 3 camps separately, but sometimes to make that tent work, and what we do under the tent is everybody sits together in the same room. And that's what you're going to see next May when you go to Capital Camps.
That's very
because we're not going to forget, and you are going to go. So, but the other thing I was just going to say, just very briefly, because I don't want to let it pass, the issue of the Jewish, the kid who says, I don't want to go to a Jewish camp.
A Jewish camp.
A Jewish camp,
Right.
Okay. So you happen to ask me specifically about my niece, and the other part of the story is that my niece wouldn't have thought about going to a Jewish camp.
Would not have.
No, does not come from a background that would suggest to her Jewish camp, even though her aunt is heavily involved in Jewish camps. I'm just the aunt. Anyway, but what happened was the Jewish camp she looked at, a light bulb went off because the Jewish camp offered something phenomenal. It wasn't the Jewish thing that said, come on, it was something else. And so that's what is the come on, so to speak, to get kids who would not otherwise go to Jewish camp to go to Jewish camp. Because you know what? You can do great things at Jewish camp that may have nothing to do with being Jewish. And the second thing I would just say on that subject is that we have people in the field who go and try to talk to families about going to Jewish camp. And there's somebody I'm thinking about in New Jersey who told me recently that she has a 100% success rate when she goes into the living room of a family who may not be interested in Jewish camp, it may not be their thing, she will sell them on Jewish camp because they will see that Jewish camp offers something tremendous.
Oh, no. Finish the thought. Because
part?
there are people who are watching right now.
Right.
And what you said was, this person goes into the living room of a family that may not be already thinking of Jewish camp.
Correct.
And she has a 100% success
Correct.
rate. Now, in part, I should ask her to sit in that chair.
I'm
and
happy
ask-
to bring her in
Okay,
too.
okay.
There'll be another chair here. Okay.
Okay.
Crowded table.
But do you have any idea what she says? And the reason I ask you is,
that's a good question, okay.
we've got viewers right now watching. I mean, one of the things I'm
Right.
concerned with is that I understand who the Shalom TV audience is. And in part, they're lovely people who are also struggling themselves. How do they find Jewish identity? How do they not find Jewish identity? And one of the reasons why I was so excited that the two of you would be willing to sit with me is I wanted people who were already not in that mindset to hear the two of you, because maybe you would say something, and next summer they'll make sure that they at least explore, if not send
Right.
their child. So I would love to have, that kind of social moment where
Well,
somebody
sure.
comes into a room with a bright, lovely father and mother who just aren't into Jewish terribly much, and yet something is said to them, and by the time she leaves, they're going to send their child to a Jewish camp. What do you think they say? What do you think she says?
The first thing they say is, not every Jewish camp is right for every kid, but there's 150 camps. There is one that is right for
I'll
every
be the
kid,
parent.
right?
Well, but why?
So
would-
what is
by the
your
way,
what are you interested in? What is your kid interested in?
My kid, I got one son, he's a sports freak.
Good.
And I've got a daughter who is into ballet and painting.
So let me take the sport free.
But I want you to understand, we don't belong to a synagogue.
You don't need to.
And we're not really, look, we know we're Jewish.
Right.
We know we're Jewish. But we don't celebrate, the truth is we don't observe kashrut in or out of the house.
So
and I
did you know that
I
there's a
don't need
camp
to-
that has Ron Blumberg that is running a specialty program in the camp for baseball, interested in baseball.
Very good, Jerry.
Or Lenny Kraselberg,
Everybody
who's
should
doing
know.
for swimming.
Ron Bloomberg is an ex-New York Yankee. He's on Shalom TV, incidentally, in a panel in Greenwich, Connecticut. But yes, if I had a child who really loved baseball, Jeremy has figured out what to say to me. Ron Bloomberg's going to be there?
Ron Bloomberg will be there
Whoa.
running, training for that kid. Lenny Kraselberg training from a swimming
Okay.
skill.
What
and
does my kid have to do, though? Does my kid have to pray every day?
Depends on the camp you go to.
I don't want my
Raj.
kid to have to pray every day.
But the kid is
Do
going
I have a Jewish camp where my kid doesn't have to pray every
There are
day?
Jewish camps, they don't pray every day. There are Jewish camps that are saying a short Birkat Hamazon after the
You
meal.
understand, I have no idea what Birkat Hamazon
Or
is.
saying a blessing before the meal and a blessing after the meal. Some camps do, some camps don't.
If
and
my
we don't
kid
make
wants to
any
sit there and
requirement.
say nothing, is that okay?
Absolutely fine. We have 4 real requirements to be a Jewish camp listed on our website. You have to be a not-for-profit institution. That your money, if you make the operating entity makes money, it goes back into scholarships and capital improvements. You have to have a Jewish mission, a Jewish education mandate. Number 3, you have to recognize and celebrate Shabbat in some form. Not Shomer Shabbat, not fully. Shabbat is a different day, and the program is different at the camp that day versus the other 6 days. And finally, you have to have Israel as a component of the program. And we're not saying where you are politically on Israel, but that Israel still is an important part of as the Jewish state. Those 4 criteria, you match those, you're at least listed on our website, and then you can take advantages of the various programs we run. But within that, there's a big tent.
Of course.
And that's that to me is the really exciting power of what's been created here, is that we're talking to one another. What we experienced in talking to right-wing girls-only camp that month. It'll be boys-only next month. But and it was, we were sharing passion for the camp experience, and this director was sharing with us the power of the joy he's creating. And by the way, I wasn't allowed to go into the dining hall to see the girls, singing and dancing, but Elisa did, and the other board members saw unbelievable joy at being Jewish. That was just very powerful.
And by the way, they were singing not only Jewish songs, but secular songs that the camp was happy to have them sing, and they were, again, the kind of thing they would get at any camp. But they were totally into it. By the way, is your son going? I just want to know, is this 100%? What's the record?
Bo, as somebody who's into the, my whole life is devoted to this, I love what you say, and I love the 4 requirements. I consider them to be 3, the fact that they're nonprofits, but the 3 Jewish components to what you want from a Jewish camp. I would want every Jewish family to say, "Oh, I want my child to be around that."
I don't think we're getting much obstacle once we get in the door, and once someone experiences it. Whether you see a video, I want you to come to our leaders' assembly even before March.
I want Shalom TV to be at all these places.
Because we gather together the field of Jewish camping every other year in March in a conference, and that too is big tents.
Good for you.
Of all camps and their boards and their communities that support. We're not into excluding, we're into including. And that as an organization, I think, is a hallmark of what we've been able to achieve.
One quick story.
Sure.
I love stories.
As many stories as you want.
No, one quick story. So many years ago, Rob and I were going around looking at camps at the very early years of the foundation. And there was one camp that had gotten a grant. We were giving a lot of small direct grants because that's what we could do at the time. We went to a camp that was a labor, I'd call it labor Zionist camp. I'm not sure exactly how it would describe itself, but I'm going to describe it for that moment. And the only signs of it being Jewish were the names of the bunks, Emma Lazarus, things like that. Their Shabbat, we asked about Shabbat, and Shabbat, they did do Shabbat, but Shabbat was more, if I recall, discussing heroes of the movement, and I can't tell you exactly what they did beyond that with Shabbat.
I understand.
And we walked out of camp, and we said, "Oh God, I don't know. Is this Jewish enough? Is it Jewish enough?" And as we were running out of camp, a girl, I would call her woman, she was a teenager, came running after us, and she was a camp counselor, and she handed us her master's thesis, and she said to us, "I want you to read it when you have time." And it was about how this Jewish camp, her Jewish camp, had made her Jewish.
That's wonderful.
It's a great story.
That's a great story, Elisa.
Right. Taught us a lesson, which is that, again, there's room under the tent for everybody.
Yes. Just out of curiosity, just for fun,
Sure.
you both were campers. Only you have to use just one word. When you think about your camp experience, you remember most what? One word.
This is so un-Jewish, one word. I don't know if I can do it. It's really tough. I'm going to negotiate for 2. So I'm going to negotiate for 2. Start with friends if you need 1.
Okay, friends is fine. Friends would be number 1.
Friends is number
And what's number 2?
Friends Jewish.
Interesting. What would
slash
be your
Jewish.
words?
I would have said friends. That was my.
Okay,
my
what's your second word?
joy?
Joy.
Jewish joy.
Well said.
Another word.
Oh, he took mine. Mystical.
Okay. If I had said singing, would it resonate with either of you?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it.
I mean, when I think of what camps are, Jewish camps, they're everything else that they can be. But there is a magic if you've got a good Jewish song leader. A magic.
You're 100% right. And camps that are singing
Yes.
and are dancing together, they
Magic.
are creating that
Act.
community that stays
Right.
together forever.
May I ask, what is your personal Jewish background?
So I grew up in a traditional conservative home in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Did you wear a kippah then?
No. did
So
not.
why a kippah now?
I just,
When did that happen?
I think it's my journey started really at camp, reinforced back at home and back through youth group and USY. I don't think there's ever one silver bullet. We're not going to find one trip, one experience that solves all the problems of Jewish identity, but camp at a young age can put you on that path, and it did so for me. I remember going to college and I met a guy from Camperman in California, who is now my best friend for 32 years, as a result of a common experience from camp that has stayed with us for our lives, and we've gone on our journey in some ways together as well. And now with child rearing and the whole bit, it's been a great path. But
So what community do you now affiliate with?
I live in Englewood, New Jersey, and I'm at Abat Torah and Modern Orthodox congregation.
That's lovely. And your wife is comfortable there too?
She's,
Her background?
She has found her way too, in part because of I think camp opened. She would say camp opened her up. She grew up in a reform family, and but it was her camp experience that made her open to the point when we met. She could see living a Shomer Shabbat life was doable, and being kosher was doable, and we've found our way.
You're a very special man. Same question. What's your Jewish
No
background?
secrets. I grew up in a conservative home.
Yes. Where was it again?
I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, Chicago and
Right.
Skokie, Illinois.
Right.
Right.
The place where they had that incredible Illinois Supreme Court decision to allow the Nazis to march through Skokie.
Right. And I was a First Amendment lawyer at the time. So
Were
just so
you?
know. So that's
So
a different
were you-
discussion.
No,
Do you want-
were you therefore, did you recognize that the Nazis had to march?
Yes.
Okay.
This was not a popular
No, but you were
popular
right.
point.
You-
I was
no.
actually working as a First Amendment lawyer for a law firm in Chicago at that point, and this was the topic of discussion in my parents' house. So it was. it
How
was
interesting for you.
Yeah.
Is that can I asterisk for a minute?
Sure.
Okay, so your Columbia law.
Mm-hmm.
I read about you and I see your Columbia law and I get a chill. My mother was one of the first women to be accepted by
Really?
Columbia
Wow.
law.
Wow.
When she
That's
got her
extraordinary.
degree in the very early 40s.
Wow.
And she was an Orthodox, observant woman who would not go to class on Saturday. And they
sure
made
heard
an
of her. Wait a
exception
second.
for her.
Really?
Yes, and
What's-
her name was Rebecca Golub, and she was one of the first women.
That's extraordinary.
Isn't it?
Absolutely extraordinary.
Well, anyway, when I saw that there
Yeah.
was by the way, I love you now, but I even loved you before I met you.
I went to Columbia Law School.
No, it was something.
Applied for Columbia.
There's no doubt. It was
My
just-
daughter's there too.
Is she?
She's a law
Oh,
student
how
at Columbia.
lovely.
But
Mazel tov.
that is really extraordinary because when I was at Columbia, honestly, it was at most a third women even
That's
at that
right.
time, and that was in the. I know it seems like ancient history, but it was in the late 70s. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Asterisk done. Okay,
Okay.
you come back to so anyway. You're from Skokie, conservative.
I grew up as a conservative Jew. I was a very rebellious kid growing up, and I really rebelled against religion. I never thought that this was something I was going to pursue in my life. But the seeds of camp were really pretty well established. And eventually came back to the Jewish community during college through the Save Soviet Jewry movement. My husband, Rob, grew up in a Reform background.
Where?
He grew up in New Jersey, in West Orange, New Jersey. We came from actually very different backgrounds. We would always joke that it was sort of like an intermarriage because we had very different views of sort of putting Judaism together. Because
He was liberal, though, also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean liberal as opposed to Orthodox Judaism?
No,
or liberal as opposed to?
no.
Political?
In terms of his orientation.
You mean would he be agreeing with me on the First Amendment
Yes.
issue? I have to ask him about that. I really don't know.
Okay.
The answer is probably he's an
Where did you
ex-lawyer
meet?
too. We met practicing law.
Okay.
So I'll have to check back on what his feeling is about the Skokie March. But anyway, I would describe ourselves today. We've been members of practically every synagogue in terms of a denomination. And so although we are currently at 2 conservative synagogues and probably going to join a Reform one as well in another town where we spend time, I would describe us as very, very open denominationally. We are, I would describe our lifestyle as probably more conservative.
Shabbat?
Shabbat in our house is this: Friday night.
Yes.
It's absolutely Shabbat.
That's
we are
what I
not
mean.
Shomer Shabbat.
No,
but
you're
although
mainstream conservative Jewry. You have a lovely Shabbat observance and table every Friday night.
every Friday night,
Virtually without fail. Virtually.
I'd say almost, yes, virtually without fail. It
Yes.
is. Our kids know Friday is Friday, and my sons emailed me just before I came here the guest list for this Friday, which is a long guest list, and my kids know that's the time that they bring their friends and whatever. So that's our Friday night. But in terms of where we are on the sort of Jewish spectrum, we're really open, very open.
Inclusive.
Inclusive, but very egalitarian. So that's where we sort of pick our
Okay.
places.
Elisa, do you worry for the future of American Jewry?
Oh, I hate to be the doubter queen. So the answer is yes and no. I mean, I do worry. I do worry because in so many of the places that I am involved in Jewish life, everybody is sitting at some board table someplace, just sort of going like this, saying, what are we going to do? On the other hand, I've seen people come back to Judaism who weren't there initially. I was that kid. I think there are always possibilities. And I think what's really most important, and this was why I sort of emphasize the idea of, at least in our family, that we want to be very open denominationally, is because I think that we as Jews have to be very accepting in how Judaism is expressed. It may not be the way that my parents or my mother in particular expressed Judaism, that I've expressed Judaism, or that my kids will, and I have to be okay on that.
Good for you.
And that's,
Good for
so
you.
in that case, I'm not worried. I just have to, not be a control freak.
You and I were at the conversation together.
Yeah.
This extraordinary event created by Gary Rosenblatt of the Jewish Week. And one of the things that struck me was how he had brought in individuals who were helping to create alternative forms of Jewish life. And when I hear you talk about being open, it reminds me again, always, that very often we bring to wherever we are in life the memories we have as a child, and what it was the right way. And the reality is that Jewish life now is so open. There are so many expressions of, quote, authentic Jewishness, that we are in a very lucky stage of life if we are able in the Jewish community to encourage and to embrace the various forms of Jewish expression. We have an amazing chance for the Jewish
Absolutely.
future. And I say that because it brings me to what you're doing.
Right.
And you are also at the forefront of a major movement that is embracing Jewish life for tens of thousands of young people. And for that, you should be applauded and congratulated. But I assume also you're impressed with the extent to which there is this varied and large and inclusive and innovative and young person's way of looking at so much of what Jewishness
Right.
is.
Well, look, first, I probably should say I wish my label were just Jewish,
Yes.
because it's not about, maybe, yes, I
You're
affiliate with the
absolutely
congregation,
right.
but I'm Jewish and I'm proud of it.
Right.
And I'm colored because I've just returned from visiting 5 camps in Ontario, Canada, across a spectrum. And I think the future of Judaism in North America is alive and well if you see the spirit of what's happening, in these magical places. it's going to create the next generation of committed Jews. It may not look at like Judaism was for your parents or grandparents. It's Judaism for today, which has evolved and changed.
But you're both extraordinary people. I was so happy that you were willing to come and that you were willing to join.
That's our pleasure.
And I want this invitation for Shalom TV to come to any events you create where you're bringing in all these groups together and training them, because it would be thrilling to see. But I wish you both kol tuv v'hatzlacha.
Thank you.
You do extraordinary work. Jeremy, I love you very, very much.
Thank
It's
you.
always good to be
Yeah,
with you.
wonderful to be with you.
Elisa, it's
Thank you
been a
so
joy
much.
meeting
Same
you. You're a
here.
very
Absolutely
special
same here.
human being.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
thank you. And that was my meeting with Elisa Spungen Bildner and Jeremy Fingerman, both who are with the Foundation for Jewish Camp. I hope you enjoyed hearing them as much as I did. As always, I ask you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to the ideas that Jeremy and Elisa expressed here on our program together. Please email me and write me or post on our Facebook wall or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And if you'd like to be in touch either with Jeremy or Elisa and learn more about the Foundation for Jewish Camp, you can do so by being in touch at
www.jewishcamp.org.
Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.